What's up, guys? Adam here with Monster Iron, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about how to inspect a wheel loader. Now, I have a Cat 950M sitting right behind me. I'm going to kind of go through what I look for when I'm buying one of these. Just kind of some important details to watch out for, some expensive fixes if you kind of overlook them. Definitely going to cost you a lot of money. So anyway, I'm going to kind of walk you through all that and kind of give you my 2 cents on how to buy one of these, or when you're inspecting them, you can kind of take some things into consideration to see how you should make an offer on one if you're buying one in the used market. So let me start off by, first thing I always look at is tires, because tires for wheel loaders are very, very expensive. Now, one thing I want to talk about is radial versus bias. So anytime you see an R on a tire, that's going to mean a radial tire. If it has a dash, that basically is going to mean it's just a bias tire. Now, the biggest difference between radial and bias is bias tires are going to be a little bit thicker traditionally, depending on the ply, usually for lower speeds. But if you're roading your loader quite a bit, a radial tire is always best. Now, obviously not the end of the world. If it's got a bias tire on it, you're going to road the machine a lot. These tires are going to get really hot. You can always replace them later. Just keep in mind they're going to wear out probably quite a bit quicker. So one thing I definitely want to point out is tires. Tires are very, very expensive on these loaders, especially this 950 here with these 23.5 25s. Very, very expensive tire. You know, you're probably looking at about 15 grand for a set of these, brand new. Anyway, that's always the first thing I look at when I'm looking at the loader. How are the tires? And then also, are the tires mismatched? Now, that's one thing, and don't ask me why, that bugs the crap out of me on loaders when people have mismatched tires on them. Do not replace tires with different tread patterns. I get it, like sometimes you got to get what you get on a job site or whatever, but like at least get the same tread pattern to where they all match, and then they kind of are all going to wear the same. I can't tell you how many loaders I've got in on trades and bought over the years that have different mismatched tires on them, and it just looks like crap, and it just sets a bad precedent when you're looking at a used machine. You're like, okay, really? Like, you're going to have mismatched tires on it? Come on. Again, not the end of the world, but just something I look at when I'm buying these machines. It kind of sets the precedent. I'm like, okay, did they actually care about this machine, or did they take terrible care of it? And then it kind of leads you into other things. Now, keep in mind, I am not a mechanic. I'm a sales guy. So I know these machines very, very well, but I'm not a mechanic. So this is my 2 cents on this. A lot of mechanics will probably give their own input, but this is what I look for when I'm buying a wheel loader. One of the other things that I look for, one of the first things that I think are very, very overlooked on wheel loaders, even if they have low hours on them, is these center pins. Now, this is going to be a huge expense. If these center pins are worn out, which are located right here, you have center pin right here, center pin right here. So when these are worn out, when you have to replace these, they get very, very expensive, and it is a lot of labor. You have to separate the whole machine. You have to press out the bushings, press out the pins. Very, very expensive process, a lot of labor. So always check, get somebody in the cab if you can, move the machine around, articulate the machine back and forth, have somebody watch those center pins for you. If they move a bunch, you're probably gonna have to replace at least the bushings. You might have to do pins and bushings. And if they're really bad, like I've seen before, you're gonna have to get them line board, and you're talking big money doing that. So I would highly recommend, if you see a machine that has worn out center pins, I would say give yourself probably 10 grand, just rule of thumb, 10,000 bucks to replace those. Now, again, not the end of the world. Everything's doable, everything's fixable, but it's just something you have to keep in mind when you're buying one of these on the used market. Another thing I want to point out, now this machine has DEF. This is a Tier 4 final example. One thing I want to point out, and it is so important on these newer machines, is did they take care of the DEF system on these machines? A lot of people will run dirty DEF through their system. It'll clog up the injectors, the pumps. That is one thing you always want to check on these. Check the past emissions codes on it. See how many times a code has popped up. I always look at that when I'm looking inside the cab. Okay, how many times has this been a problem throughout this machine's life? If somebody's not afraid to tell you that, then you probably want to avoid the machine. And now if a dealer lets you walk all over the machine, check it out, or you're out of state, you got a mechanic taking a look at it, and they're, hey, free reign, look out, whatever, that's usually mean they're not hiding something. Usually they're pretty cool, but that's definitely something that is going to be extremely costly. DEF pumps, DEF tanks, very, very expensive on these machines, on these emission systems, and you know how problematic they can be, at least most people do. So definitely something you want to keep in mind when you're looking at these medium-sized wheel loaders. And then other thing I kind of first do is just do kind of a walk around, like check these medium-sized wheel loaders. So what I like to do is I kind of walk around, I look at the cylinders, check the cylinders. Okay, is there any pitting on the rods? How did the rods look? Is there any leakage on the cylinders? Any seepage? Look at the hydraulic lines. Are the hydraulic lines worn out? And I kind of just walk around. If it has teeth like this, are the teeth worn out? If there's cutting edges, are the cutting edge worn out? Can you flip the cutting edge? It's always good to check the bottom of the bucket too. A lot of people won't actually lift the bucket off the ground on these things. You always want to check the bottom of the bucket. Sometimes they'll be extremely worn out and thin. Something you definitely want to keep in mind because these buckets are very, very expensive to repair. And you just kind of walk around, check the differential. So that's another thing too that is really overlooked and is very expensive on these loaders. You know, how do the differentials look? If you can, if the dealer will let you, pull the plug on them, check the fluid, see how the fluid looks. Is there any contaminants in the differentials? Definitely something you want to look at. And if you can get oil samples, even better. So check all the pins. A lot of guys obviously already know, check the pin and bushing wear on these things. Can get very, very expensive, especially on these larger, medium-sized loaders. Check the lug nuts. You know, is there any missing lug nuts? And one thing I think to point out that is always very overlooked is serial number. Check the serial number. One thing that I haven't talked about previously that I'm going to talk about now is gray market machines. Check to see if it's a gray market machine. Because that's going to be, a lot of people don't know the difference between a gray market machine and a US spec machine. If you buy a gray market, like say this 950 machine, you're gonna have a harder time finding parts. Some cat dealers don't even like working on them. So that's definitely going to be something you want to consider on these is it a gray market machine? And usually it will actually have, you'll see an indicator on here that'll say, it'll say for a different market. So it'll say for like China, or some kind of different, then the serial number plate will actually look a little bit different. So like this machine was manufactured in Brazil, but it's got the Peoria, Illinois cap stamp on it. So this machine is a US spec machine. And another way you can tell that too is, does it have emissions on it? If it has DEF, then it is a US spec machine traditionally. So I kind of walk around, check for leaks, look at all the hoses. One thing I do like to do is check underneath the cab too. Now, if a machine has a ride control option on it, you definitely want to check the accumulators on the ride control. Sometimes those can leak, sometimes those can be bad, so definitely something you want to check. And I just kind of walk around the outside. I always like popping up the engine hood on these things. I'm not going to do it on this one, but always want to pop the engine, obviously. Check with the engine running to see if there's blow-by. If there's blow-by coming out, definitely something you want to check out. So anyway, this particular example, we're actually going to end up sending this machine to auction. It's got a little more higher hours on it. So we've got an auction company that's going to auction it for us. But, you know, check the cab. Is the glass broken on the cab at all? You just kind of want to get an overall sense of like, hey, has this machine been maintained? It's just like anything else, right? Just kind of some things you want to keep an eye out for. You know, this machine, for having the amount of hours on it is actually pretty clean. This machine's got about 11,000 hours on it, which for a wheel loader, sounds high. It's really not that high if you take care of it. This machine's really, really tight. Tires are good. They all match. Yeah, cosmetically, it's got some paint wear on it. Not the end of the world. But this machine has been actually fairly well taken care of. So, I mean, surprisingly, for having this kind of hours on it, the customer we got this from is all the way out in Texas. Came out of the oil fields down there, from what the story I got on the unit. And just doesn't have a lot of like actual operational hours on it. We've checked, and mostly they're idle hours on this thing. So, you know, and then the counterweight too. That's one thing to look at back here. You want to take a look at the counterweight. You know, has there been any counterweight repairs on it? If they backed into anything? You know, and then usually if there's impact marks on the machines, okay, how did that affect other things? Are there other broken? Is the hood broken? Are the hood latch broken? You know, all sorts of different things you want to keep an eye out. You want to get that kind of overall sense of, okay, has this machine been taken care of, or has it been abused? Really, really important. And you will not believe how many people buy brand new $400,000 loaders and do not take care of them. I see machines all the time with 2,000-3,000 hours on them used, and they're hammered because some of these big companies, they either take really good care of them or they don't care. So, and they just send them to auction. So anyway, just something you really want to keep an eye out for. And then I kind of usually, after I fire the machine up, play around with it a little bit, then I get out of the cab and I kind of look through the cab really thoroughly. You know, does the door work? How's the seat? You know, check all the functions inside the cab. I'll do all the controls work. You know, how's the headlight? You know, just want to get that overall sense. I can't emphasize that enough. It's just like anything else, kind of go with your gut. So if the overall sense of the machine is it hasn't been taken care of, you might want to have it looked at it a little more thoroughly. If you do look at it and you're like, you know what, somebody's taking really good care of this thing. And another thing I want to talk about is, have they washed the machine? Have they maintained it by detailing it? You know, everybody knows job sites get dirty. We get it. They're gonna have dust and dirt in them. But some people never clean these machines, which is crazy to me, because you invest all this money into buying these pieces of equipment and you don't clean them. So that to me indicates like somebody cared about this piece of equipment. So it's definitely something that I look for. This machine has been very well taken care of. Seat looks great. Interior of the cab looks great. All the buttons work inside here. But just, you know, check everything. And again, always check the past codes. Very, very important to see, because a lot of people, what they'll do is, especially small fly-by-night dealers or small contractors, are trying to get out of their machines quickly and trying to get some capital. They'll delete the codes out of them and then hope some stupid person will come by and say, oh yeah, it looks great, I'm gonna buy it. And all of a sudden all these codes pop up as soon as you put a few hours on it. So anyway, one thing you definitely want to keep an eye out when you're buying these units. You know, another thing is check the cab, you know, and this is gonna sound crazy, but has the machine ever been rolled over? I have seen wheel loaders that have been rolled over and the ROPS is dented or the ROPS has been damaged. So one thing I want to talk about is Caterpillar Finance and other lenders in the equipment industry. Some of them actually will not lend on machines where the ROPS has been damaged. A lot of people don't know that. So if you're going out and you're trying to buy a wheel loader, some cat dealers will actually tell you, oh, I can't loan on that machine because the ROPS is damaged. If the ROPS is damaged, stay away from the machine. That means the machine has been potentially rolled over in an accident. Don't buy it. But anyway, and then another thing is like the seatbelt too. Like such a small little thing, but does it have a compliant seatbelt in it? Has the seatbelt ever been changed out? You know, safety is extremely important on these machines. One thing you always want to keep an eye out, you know, does all the safety equipment work? Does the horn work? Does the backup alarm work? Do all the lights work? Now, all that stuff, again, can be fixed, but it all costs money. So you want to make sure you negotiate your price down. If the machine needs, you know, $10,000 worth of work, maybe negotiate down 15 grand to cover your butt, because there's always extra stuff that you need to fix on these than you account for, almost always. It's rare that I run into a machine that needs work where you don't run into more work. So definitely that's how I usually negotiate on machines is, okay, I'm going to estimate best case scenario, this is going to be 10 grand, worst case scenario, 20, always goes worst case scenario. So anyway, those are kind of some things I look out for on these machines. Those are just some of the main points. Obviously there's way more to these than that, but that's just, those are some things I look at. One thing I forgot to mention is the hydraulic pumps. Always want to check out the hydraulic pumps too. Put the bucket on the ground, you know, how's the hydraulic pressure? If you can get the pressure tested, great. But I like to test out the pumps because the pumps in these things are very expensive. But, you know, machine needs a little work. Don't be afraid to, you know, get it checked out. And, you know, or if it's a trusted dealer, have them check it out for you. They usually have mechanics on staff, or maybe they have an independent mechanic. Have them check it out for you. Get a second opinion on it. That's always a great way to go about things. Okay, so one other thing that I failed to mention earlier that I completely forgot about that I always like to look at, and what is the most important thing, is the transmissions. Now, some of these wheel loaders are hydrostatic. Some of them have traditional transmissions in them. Now, this loader has a traditional transmission in it, but like loaders like Komatsu, they'll have hydrostatic pumps that drive the machine. So definitely something you want to take a look at. How's the transmission shift? Run it through all the gears. If it has auto shift, how does the auto shift work? You know, run the machine real hard. Try to put a load in the bucket if you can. Obviously, I get it. Sometimes you can't do that. You're on a, you know, dealer lot or whatever. You can't put a load in the bucket. You know, or ask your mechanic to do that if at all possible. Just run it through all the gears. You know, have somebody listen for the transmission. How's the transmission sound? Is it shifting smoothly? How do the fluids look? You know, how does the torque converter feel? Things of that nature. So that is another thing I failed to mention earlier that is extremely important on these. You know, you're looking at a very expensive transmission if you go to buy a reman or a replacement transmission in these. So definitely something that you want to keep in mind when you're purchasing one of these on the used market. So anyway, thanks guys for watching this video, and we got more great videos coming your way. Subscribe to our page. Thank you.